Hello, everybody. I am Christine Murray, Director of the Festival of Place, and I'd like to welcome you here to Festival of Pineapples. If this is your first time on AirMeet, I'm going to give you a speed tour. To the right, you'll find the chat for the entire session and as well the entire event. So feel free to put your comments in there. Help us keep it an inclusive atmosphere. And above that, you'll see people where you can see other people here in attendance here today. My name is Christine Murray, once again, Director of the Festival of Place and Editor-in-Chief of the We're an independent media company that publishes articles, hosts a podcast, and runs events such as this one about how to develop and support livable places where citizens thrive. So this event is in association with the Design Council. We started these awards 2 years ago, and it's a unique event where we bring together developers, designers, and placemakers from across the built environment to share their work as they vie to win a golden pineapple for place. We're so pleased to be working with the Design Council yet again, both in the criteria for these awards and sharing our passion for design and its importance in creating safer and healthier places in the context of a climate emergency. So we'll be hearing from the shortlist for the Pineapple for Community Engagement, which seeks to recognize an initiative that meaningfully involves the community in the creation, design, evolution, development, or maintenance of a place. The engagement can be digital or physical. The judges will be considering how the initiative connected with stakeholders and citizens and how their feedback contributed to the design or development process. So it's my pleasure to introduce the chair for the session for community engagement. Maier is an award-winning editor and leader in public policy. She's the previous editor-in-chief of Inside Housing and Social Housing and editor of Local Government Chronicle and Materials Recycling Week. So welcome, Emma, and over to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Christine. It's great to be here. So welcome once again to Festival of Place, the Pineapples. I'm really pleased to be here this morning and to be chairing the session. Really looking forward to hearing from all of our shortlisted panelists here this morning. We have 6 projects shortlisted for the Community Engagement Award, and we're going to have the opportunity to hear from each and every one of them. Each team is going to have just 10 minutes to present, and our judges are then going to follow up with 10 minutes to ask their own questions. To keep it fair, I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on the time, and to keep everything on track, I'll give each presenter a 1-minute warning, just to make sure that it's all fair and even. Watching closely, of course, will be our expert judging panel. You'll hear more from them, of course, after the first presentation, but I shall introduce them quickly now so you know who is sat here with us. So first I'd like to introduce Aminah Ricks, architect, urbanist, writer and teacher. Aminah created Future Places to involve children in the process of improving our cities. And she works with governments, NGOs and institutions all around the world, helping them to embrace the experiences and perspectives of children. We also have Ben Adams, who's the founding architect of Ben Adams Architects. Ben strives to make buildings that are clever, beautiful, surprising, purposeful, and his work is underpinned by 3 important principles, those of simple design ideas, design excellence, and innovation through research. And finally, on our judging panel this morning, Vicky Brown, architect at Make Architects. Vicky has led the delivery of Make's flagship regeneration project at St James's Market, and she's contributed to a wide range of high-profile projects. Her portfolio also includes residential developments, resort master plans, commercial offices, a whole range. So I think you'll agree that our judges are a formidable team. We look forward to benefiting from their experience and expertise, and I have no doubt that they'll be putting our contenders through their paces a little bit. So just to echo what Christine said earlier on, please do use the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. You can use that to introduce yourself, and you'll also see, I think below me, you should see a box where you can use some emojis to perhaps encourage our speakers, and do remember to be respectful and to help us to create a nice, inclusive and encouraging atmosphere. Please do also use the chat box if you'd like to during the presentations, to ask any questions you might have. The presenters won't be directly addressing your questions, but the judges might choose to incorporate your comments when they're posing their questions. So that's your opportunity just to feed in. So now time to move on to our first contender, which is Active Streets Edinburgh. As part of this project, local community members, including primary and secondary school children, had an opportunity to have their say on making everyday journeys sustainable. So here to tell us more, I'm pleased to welcome our presenters, Abigail Blunt and Duncan Bain from New Practice. So Abigail and Duncan, over to you.
Morning, everybody. Let me just make sure we can bring our presentation up. Okay. Great. Great.
Perfect. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Abigail Blunt, and I'm a designer at New Practice.
And I'm Duncan Bain. I'm an associate at New Practice. So New Practice are an architecture practice that work to develop the creative capacity of cities and to connect people with the decision-making processes that underpin the urban experience. We're really thrilled that we're here to present a project that we worked on last year, and it's been nominated for Pineapple. It was a project delivered right at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it presented us with a huge learning curve of how to adapt our kind of our normal, very hands-on practice towards wholly remote engagement processes, and to sensitively navigate through a time of crisis when people's attentions were obviously on much more urgent issues. So Active Streets was the brainchild of our client Sam, who's the leader of Parsons Green Primary School Parent Council. They'd identified a need to address urban challenges directly around their school grounds to better support young people to make active journeys to and from school. And their goal was to engage young people and the wider community in developing proposals for improved active travel across the area. So it was funded by the active travel charity Sustrans, and we worked with Parsons Green to develop an initial programme of creative workshops in schools and at community events starting in March of 2020. The project was funded and supported by Sustrans Scotland's fantastic Places for Everyone funding, which supports community groups to lead placemaking and behaviour change processes across Scottish communities, enabling them to access design services and support. The fund really emphasises community engagement as central to a 7-stage programme of work that's modelled after the REBA work stages. And we were really excited at the outset of this process to be brought in by Parsons Green to lead on stages 0 to 1, engaging with communities in Portobello, which is a collection of suburban neighbourhoods in the eastern outskirts of Edinburgh, and somewhere that I'm quite familiar as a place that I lived during my studies.
And this is somewhere that I have fond memories of growing up. It's super rare that you get to work on a project where you have memories walking up and down the promenade, holding a Greggs sausage roll in one hand and your sister's hand in the other. But of course, March 2020, lockdown happened. So we had to rethink our very sort of in-person community engagement event style approach. But what this project actually presented us with was an opportunity to explore previously uncharted territory in a space that had a very personal connection with us.
So a great deal of our work, as I'm sure it has been for a lot of the people watching over the last year, has been thinking really creatively about how to take briefs and proposals that were incredibly hands-on and find meaningful ways to develop outcomes through remote processes. So the images on screen are very typical of the sort of engagement processes we would have run before the pandemic, and we hope to run again soon. And at the beginning of any engagement process, we consider how we can successfully build trust with communities. And normally this translates to being seen, being on the ground, joining community events, having conversations. But in this instance, we had to consider things very differently. But having a fantastic grassroots community organisation like Parsons Green Parent Council at the heart of this process meant we were able to tap into a network that was already mobilised to deliver the vital work of keeping community activity alive during that first lockdown in March 2020.
So how did we tackle adapting our approach? The short answer is we kind of just tried stuff. To expand, I'll kind of outline the few questions that we felt were central from shifting our mindset from in-person engagement to the digital experience. So firstly, how do we wrestle with digital tools to recreate that messy, intuitive, creative experience that we were so used to engaging with young people in a non-pandemic world? Then, how do we learn from existing successful digital communities, people who are digitally native, communities on YouTube and Twitch, other platforms of the sort? Thirdly, how do we look at accessibility? We know that not everyone is digitally literate, but we do want everyone to engage. So how do we make sure that we kind of use the tools that we have to break down barriers to access? And then finally, how do we remain sensitive? We understand it was lockdown first time round, people were preoccupied, and we wanted to make sure that people knew that they could take part without taking up too much space in places that may be used for information sharing or support.
We developed a wide range of alternative tools that all focused on different ways to explore the topic of active travel and making sure that as many people as possible could find at least one way to take part, from print-at-home activity packs to smartphone surveys to webinars and crafting activities. Some of these allowed me personally to have a lot of fun in a pretty geeky way. So this is a map of the project area, but it's built in the hugely popular video game Minecraft. So model making and messy crafts are a huge part of how we typically work with young people in a physical space, and it was a natural fit to use this sandbox game as a space for creativity and invention. And this really replicated a lot of the kind of creative unpredictability of this youth engagement setting, and we marveled at some of the amazing ways that people would identify and plan out new pocket spaces for play in their neighborhoods, through to the more unusual, extending their school hundreds of meters into the air.
And then there were those who reveled in creative destruction. This was a local high school in a very early iteration where we hadn't kind of gotten grips with the server settings just yet. But we've been fascinated by learning not from the fields necessarily of architecture or community engagement, but looking to those who have been creating vibrant, dynamic, and inclusive communities within digital platforms for years.
And what's really critical here is we're going to where people already are. So almost everyone has some experience of watching a video on YouTube, whereas conferencing systems like Zoom can be daunting to some and inaccessible, requiring special software and logins. We look to make use of well-established platforms that focused on communication and interactivity. So as an example, this is Twitch, which is an online platform where tens of thousands of people gather to watch people play video games. But while they do that, they chat, they tell stories, they ask questions. And just like the communities around Minecraft, Twitch is where you can learn lessons about what's required to create meaningful two-way conversations online and how to incentivize engagement and create a setting that seems approachable and reciprocal. So as part of our Active Streets project, we worked hard to create virtual spaces that replicated the sort of constructive conversations we might have around a table in front of a site plan. For example, this YouTube Live workshop that we ran that was completely accessible to anyone with a web browser or smartphone. And we crafted a video format that linked our session to the wider identity of the Active Streets project.
So who did we engage? We engaged across 5 different schools, from parents to young people, with around 40% of participants engaging through the Minecraft activity Duncan explained earlier. Through the number of different activity streams, we learned about how young people enjoyed the social aspect of actively traveling to school the most, talking to parents, talking to family members, talking to friends. And one young person even said that their favorite part of walking to school was speaking to the lollipop person. So what held young people back from taking these active travel routes? It was mainly safety concerns, with top suggestions for addressing these kinds of concerns being reducing traffic and also creating safer crossings. This was directly reflected in the feedback that we managed to get from the virtual school run that Duncan had explained earlier, where parents allowed us and got involved, and it helped us identify 5 key junctions that were deemed as incredibly unsafe and were kind of used as barriers to access, and made parents think, I'm not letting my young person take this active route to school because of these 5 key junctions.
So the outcome of this project is a series of suggested interventions that reflect the feedback and input of young people and the parents involved. We created a feasibility study of small to medium interventions that individually address specific issues identified, but as an aggregate would create a seismic shift in the way that people could travel by active means across Portobello. Some of these obviously translate from the feedback that we received, like traffic calming measures at identified locations, but others do reflect that kind of more nuanced conversation around the social side of active travel and incentivizing and encouraging behavior change in a generation that's critical to the uptake of active travel in the future.
So finally, what did we learn? Well, we learned how to navigate sensitively through uncharted territory in sort of the COVID-19 first iteration lockdown. We also learned how to use tech where appropriate to break down barriers to access rather than reinforcing them, using things like making sure that closed captioning or transcripts are available for audio and video content, and also making sure that we've integrated language tools to allow those, when we're working with diverse communities, to access the content also. But what we really have enjoyed is kind of looking to different spheres of work outside architecture, outside of engagement, and looking to these communities that have done great work so far. And yeah, in order for us to address all of these challenges, what we had to do was learn a whole lot of new technical stuff. So this was Duncan's setup for the virtual school run. So yeah, quite technical. But yeah, what we've learned is we need to look at digital natives and outsider community and really take learnings from other communities and embed them in our own practice. And we're really excited to start taking some of these lessons learned into the physical settings of our communities to support them to further get involved in decision-making processes across the UK. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you so much. Such creativity in the face of very, very challenging and unprecedented times. So it's so fascinating to hear that. So I'm going to move us swiftly on straight to our judges. Aminah, I'm going to bring you in first. This is your area of expertise, without doubt. I'm wondering whether you've used Minecraft and Twitch, and what your thoughts are, what your questions would be for our presenters.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for sharing this project. As she said, it's quite dear since my work involves working directly with children to get their point of view on the streetscape. And I think that the Minecraft and the technology is a great way in, because it's something that children can relate to. And I was wondering if during the engagement, either through the game, you talked about an activity pack, and when it was that like a low tech option, maybe with some kind of hand manual use things. Was there anything surprising or any kind of input that you heard from a child or a group of children that then altered in some way the final project?
I think what Abby touched upon around the social aspects of active travel was probably the most critical thing that came out of conversations with young people. I think it would be very easy to have a very technically led series of outcomes that look at traffic calming measures and all of the things that are really, really critical to creating the sort of network of interventions that create these kind of safer, more encouraging neighborhoods. But I think what we learned from talking to young people was that it's all well and good to create that infrastructure, but it's the narratives and the stories that people form around the journeys themselves and the way in which that forms a part of their daily experience and their lives. And I know that as a kid, I was lucky enough to live just a few minutes walk from my primary school, and so many of my kind of formative memories are shaped around what happened on those walks to and from school. So I think those sort of stories, and again, there's some things which come out of this process that are very direct translations of identified challenges, spatial challenges that can be addressed through technical interventions. But embedding within that series of outcome spaces for creativity, for placemaking, for trying to encourage people to see their route as fun and creative, and that's what we're really excited to hopefully take forward as this process goes on to the stages beyond 0 and 1.
Could you just one last quick question? In the activity pack, can you share a little bit about what you provided for the children and what kind of responses you got back?
Yeah, so the activity pack, I guess I'll kind of background it a little bit more as well. So obviously, we were doing this digital or remote engagement style approach, as was the safest way in order for us to continue on with this project. So the activities pack was a printed version of a lot of the activities that you could find online. So what we've tried to do in these kinds of situations and have done since is make sure that there's a bit of an equal footing in those who would want to engage via digital or would only be able to engage via, or would want to perhaps engage via sort of physical means. So I think the printed pack had very like fun activities. We kind of again wanted to like replicate the playful experience that we wanted to try and create in the digital tools. So there were things like drawing how your route to school, draw your favorite character, tell us about that character, what do they do. So it was lots of sort of creative sort of gamification, I guess, when you kind of work with young people. I guess that's quite important. And yeah, in terms of feedback, it was largely similar, to be honest. I don't think there was a massive uptake in the printed packs. It was more digital, like particularly, as I'd said, sort of 40% of people had worked or engaged through the Minecraft activity. So that was obviously incredibly popular. But yeah, in terms of the feedback that we'd gotten from the printed packs, it was largely similar. We just learned a little bit more about what people saw on their way to school and their existing experiences through sort of this drawing toolkit. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. It's a wonderful project. I think, as Duncan said, most of us here probably have memories of perhaps walking to school. I definitely do. And whatever we can do to get kids, instead of, as your staff was saying, so many, we're not going by foot, going by car. If we can get them back by foot, they'll learn their neighborhood better. And so I think this project goes a long way in that. So good job. Wonderful.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, Aminah, for your questions. Ben, I'm going to bring you in next. Can I suggest that maybe our judges just leave your cameras switched on, and then we might get more of a sort of a conversational feel to it. Let's give it a try and see how it works on screen. But Ben, over to you. Any reflections? What would you like to ask our presenters?
Hi guys, thanks for that. It was really fascinating to see and interesting. We've been doing a lot of consultation, all of it digital through the planning process in recent times as well. And I just wanted to ask, in my experience, some of it has been better. We've reached more people, we've reached them in different ways. We've probably got a broader range of views. And something's gone missing as well. I just wondered what you felt had been better and maybe what's been lost in doing it that way.
I think this project's probably an outlier in some respects of the projects that we've delivered over the last year, where like everyone else across the kind of built environment field, there's been a necessity to explore lots of new tools and technology. I guess this project was really it was delivered in March of 2020 for the most part. So it really was the very beginning of the first COVID-19 lockdown, and we were engaging with a kind of youth audience, and at the time it was young people who were still struggling to just get their head around how do they do distance learning, how do schools communicate and send resources out to young people. So in some respects, this project's probably more experimental, and there was more capacity, I think, for us to learn through testing, and some tools work better than others, and that's the reality of working at a time where you have to kind of improvise. I think in the work that we've done subsequently, I agree that you get some fantastic abilities to reach people in their own time, in their own spaces, to use platforms that they're familiar with, and to really broaden a conversation around development and decision making in the built environment. But there is a loss of opportunities, I think, particularly around this kind of co-creative space where there's only so much you can kind of learn through some of the digital tools available compared to us being in a classroom with young people and being able to have much more of an interpretive conversation, and learn through a lot of the stuff that isn't so much like an outcome that's being told. It's through the interaction you have with young people and adults within those same settings. So I think one of the challenges of this project is, I think you can use surveys to ask fantastic questions, and you can get reams of data through a lot of engagement processes. But trying to develop outcomes as a shared kind of creative experience is much more challenging. And that's something that I think, as fingers crossed, we start to open up, it's something we're really excited to kind of get back to. Oh, Emma, I think you might have your mic on mute.
Apologies, my trigger finger was a bit too active there. And we've got time for a very super quick question and succinct answer. So Vicky, over to you for.
All right, I did have a question about how you take this forward. Really, how do you see it turning into something? Is it a bit more architectural? Do you see it just being more sort of interventional, temporary measures?
Yeah, so the project's a really interesting one because it's funded by Sustrans in Scotland, and the funding stream is really about enabling community organisations, and you don't get much kind of more grassroots at a community level than the primary school parent council.
Yeah, that was great.
It's amazing for them to be enabled to take forward this kind of design services and go through this kind of REBA stage process. So we've had stages 0 to 1.
Yeah.
The process has probably been interrupted a bit by COVID because there's been so much emphasis on temporary interventions and measures, and these are really about kind of permanent long-term things. But as things return to normal, we're really excited to work with Parsons Green ongoing to try and to make a lot of the kind of feasibility study outcomes into kind of permanent installations.
Okay, so you do see a physical intervention coming out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Ours is kind of something, the feasibility study represents something of like a grab bag of potential, and then it's about exploring the realities of how those can all be rolled out. They probably all can't be rolled out, and some are more ambitious than others, but there's a lot of very small scale stuff that once the right funding's in place, we can kind of work with the schools again to roll out.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to break in. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. My clock is beeping at me. So thank you so much, Abigail and Duncan. We really appreciate it. And thank you to the judges for your questions. We're going to move on now to our next presentation. Audience members, doing great with the emojis, so keep that coming. That's brilliant. Don't forget that if you've got a question or a comment, something that you would like to put to the presenters or that you want the judges to bear in mind, then just pop it in the Q&A box. So the box to the right of me at the moment, grey box, there's chat at the top. The next one is Q&A. So just use that to pop any questions in that you'd like to. So now we're going to move on to our second presentation of the day, which is BlockWest Bristol. For this project, local people of a wide range of ages, 17 to 76, were trained to use a digital design and modular construction kit, and that was used to help build a model. So I'm going to hand over to our presentation, Melissa Mean of We Can Make. Melissa, welcome. You have got 10 minutes to persuade our judges. So I shall start the clock in just a moment. Take it away.
That's great. Really delighted to be here. I just wondered, well, just having a little tech fail in terms of it won't upload my presentation. So I did wonder whether another team might be ready to go while I sort that out. Really sorry.
Simon, are you able to give us a bit of a hand on this one? Give us just.
Hi, y'all. Melissa, do you have your presentation on your computer? Is it?
Yeah, it's on the computer.
And if you do the share screen at the bottom,
it's not coming up as anything in there that I can actually use.
Even if you do share screen and then you share your entire screen.
I'll try that.
Let's see.
Hang on a second. So sorry about this.
No.
It was working perfectly before.
That's always the way. Those gremlins know when to strike.
They absolutely do, don't they?
What do you see when you hit present to audience?
Yeah, I can walk you through it a bit, Melissa. So if you do if you do the present to audience box and then you do share screen on the right. Let me see. Is it allowing you to share anything there?
Not allowing me to do anything at the moment. Hang on. Okay, I'll just try and do it in here. Are you in there? I think I'm just sharing my screen.
Yeah, there you go. You've got it. So if you just full screen that, that'll work.
Cool.
So that's
So
there. You're ready to roll.
I'm so sorry about that, but thank you.
Need to do, just the one thing, Melissa, if you want to just press hide on that little bar that's at the bottom there, then you're good to go there, and then just full screen that again.
Appreciate your patience. That's very kind of you. Right. Okay. The clock started now.
No, I'm starting the clock now. Don't worry. Don't panic.
Yeah. I would just do, Melissa, if you just want to full screen the presentation again, then you're ready.
Is it full screened or not?
I can just see your bars, your tabs at the bottom. So if you want to just click on the presentation.
There?
Yeah, there you go. You're good to go there now. Thank you.
Okay, and back in the room already.
Lovely, welcome. Over to you, Melissa.
Great. So yeah, so Making Together is a collaboration between Knowle-West Media Centre, and we're a community-based art centre in Knowle-West, Bristol. Automated Architecture, which is a research lab which is spun out of Bartlett School of Architecture, and the community of Knowle-West. So this is our community. We're a council-built estate in South Bristol, just on the edge of Bristol, 100 years old, 5,000 homes, about 13,000 people living here. And our kind of perceptions of Knowle-West, we score very, very highly on multiple indices of deprivation, top 5 across the country. And I think, what a lot of people do when they come to Knowle-West is they kind of look at it as a problem to be fixed, or even demolished and started all over again. And I think it's kind of worth talking a bit about this kind of context of how we experience development and how we usually experience community engagement, which is this kind of assumptions about what we are as a place. So this is our Olympic-sized swimming pool, which was demolished in 2005. 16 years ago, and kind of nothing has happened. And then when development does come along, we're kind of expected to be grateful for wherever it is, no matter what its kind of quality is. And you're not really given anything other than a meager kind of right of protest to say not really what we want in the planning process, and no real space to say actually what we do want. So Making Together, and what we've been doing is trying to start development in a different kind of place. So what if we start with the assets and the resources and the know-how that we know that our community has got? So rather than start assuming that we've got to demolish everything and start again, what if we actually assume that we've got 80% of what we need already, the know-how, the experiences that we've got? And it's about more, rather than transforming and starting all over again, it's more about how do we remix some of those assets and know-how and kind of surface and imagine what might be the missing 20% to really bring things alive. And our community is really kind of diverse and kind of wonderful. You scratch the surface and you find all sorts of things. We've done 100 years of hacking and innovating and adapting things and growing small things in the spaces between. So it's a really kind of, I think, the challenge of community engagement is how do you engage with these kind of resources and this kind of know-how? So what we've done, we kind of set up a test space to try and do development and try and do community engagement in a completely different way. And one of the areas that we're quite excited about, that we think can help remix and kind of, disrupt things a bit, is around digital technology. Because if you look at the construction sector globally, construction is like the least digitized in the world, just above hunting, which is quite amazing. So, we've got this new technology kind of rolling in. What if we could use it to really kind of change the way we make places? Now, unfortunately, the signs aren't good at the moment in terms of how modern methods construction and digitized are going to be taken up. It seems to be kind of agglomerating and kind of going in great big kind of factories like this, which is making those tools and power even more distant from communities. But we're still in the early days. There is space and time there. It could be different. So imagine if those resources could be in the hands of community, could be diverse, could be democratically owned, and really, really in the hands of community. So this is our little community-based digital fabrication space, our little factory where we've got a CNC machine and laser cutters and 3D printers. So we really want to kind of play with it about how could you use these to do development different. So making together is really about kind of bringing people together and having the space to dream together and make together, using some of these new digital design tools and some of these new modern methods of construction. So we're working with Automated Architecture's Block A, which is a timber cassette, and it's like Lego, giant Lego, literally like giant Lego. So it gives a sense that you can do really instant kind of live prototyping in your hands, which is kind of wonderful. So we began our experiment, obviously, in March 2020, and we all know what 2020 was. So, we thought we would be hanging out in our factory and kind of designing and making things. Obviously, we were in Zoom world instead. But what we did manage to do, we had a wonderful kind of crew cohort of local people. 100 people applied. We had a crew of 20, aged 19 to 76. And because so many people applied, we're going to be able to get a really representative sample of who was involved. So it was a 60-40 in favour of women, which is kind of rare, I think, in a construction project. Real broad age range, real diverse background from traditional trades, artists, designers, young mums, people on furlough, people in long-term unemployed, people who've never picked up a drill or a tool before ever in their lives. We were able to create this really great non-hierarchical space where everyone's know-how and experience was valid. And I think one of the radical things we did is that everyone got paid the same flat rate for their participation. So people came together every second Friday to this Zoom space to learn, explore together, get to grip with these tools, and everyone was valued kind of equally. And I think that's a different model of community engagement, which isn't just extractive and trying to get people's views, but actually really investing in people as co-designers and co-creators. There was no fixed outcome about what would have to be made, what had to be built, but we really kind of is focusing on what do we value in our neighbourhood and what's missing, what could we create. So we got a kit out to people, so you can see little paper blocks. We also got, I don't know if you can see these, magnetic blocks versions, mini blocks versions, which is a really nice way to kind of design and prototype stuff. An online app that could use as a collaborative space to kind of to design and make things. And the response was this, which is BlockWest, which is a pavilion, a kind of shared space for the community to come together kind of safely in the time of COVID. To meet, hang out, and not have to pay the price of beer to be able to be outside and be with other people. And so we made this in our kind of car park space at the front of our building, so we could act really quickly and not be reliant on other kind of landowners, which was really great. And then we made parts of it, the component parts, in our community factory, and then all delivered to site. And this was kind of like quite an emotional moment. Most of us have never met before, apart from in Zoom world. And so this is first day on site with our crew. It was just like, boom, wow, it was pretty amazing. The ultimate antidote to kind of COVID and lockdown. And then it was kind of 2-week build time, designing and kind of making. And together we made something really, really beautiful. But I think it's the structure is kind of one thing and the process is something else, but also what it gave us was this kind of framework for kind of urban life. So all the way through kind of lockdown, we made this in September, when we've been able to host all sorts of kind of community life in it, from workshops, hanging out, play space for teams, a performance space for artists to do live performance. And we even managed a silent disco, which is kind of rather wonderful. And it's, we wanted, it was only meant to be up for kind of 6 weeks, but we kind of fell in love with it really. And have been maintaining it and keeping it, and it's still up today, sort of 9 months later, which is great, and a real resource for the whole community. And I think, in a world where we're often given master plans and long-term visions and nothing really happens, the fact that we would design, make, and have it in our hands in a really short time is a really powerful kind of thing that shows what's possible. And in terms of impact, I kind of see it at the individual level. This is Don, who's in the left corner. He's 76. And his experience of, if this is the first time in his life of 76 years that he's actually felt supported to be able to do what he wants to do and share his ideas, I mean, it's kind of like, it gives me goosebumps actually every time I talk to Don and what he was able to do. But yeah, you know, instead of being told, no, you can't do that, instead he felt that everything was doable. So it really had an impact on that individual level. And then it, you know, also had an impact on that kind of neighbourhood level. So this is John talking. He's a kind of ex-brickie, now currently homeless, but working with us at the moment. You know, saying there, you know, we're literally building our community from the bottom up. It's ours. It's given me ownership of my community. It's giving people different choices, better choices, and show how things can be. And it feels like it's just the beginning. And I think that's kind of like one of the most kind of powerful impacts out of it. Like, it's great, we've made a tangible kind of great thing, but I think we've also what we've created is a different kind of community engagement methodology. We think it's a kind of scalable methodology for co-creating with communities, both the social and infrastructure. Was that the 1 minute warning? Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is really about putting the practical tools, resources, and decision-making into community hands and really doing stuff together. And we think this can scale to other places. You know, it feels like a little bit like this at the moment. You know, we're trying to do things differently and, you know, it's quite an uphill challenge, but we're really interested to see how this could kind of spread to other places. And actually, we're live on site this week, actually taking apart BlockWest and seeing how it can be, we can turn it into other things like stages, planters, benches that we're going to then distribute around our wider neighbourhood as kind of micro spaces for stewardship and activation. And we're really interested to see how other places could adapt and adopt this methodology to meet their own context and their own kind of needs. So yeah, if anyone's out there who would like to kind of play with the Making Together methodology, we'd love to play with you too. And there's links here to a couple of films that go into a bit more detail and interviews with the people involved and a live performance as well.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and absolutely bang on time at the end there as well. Perfect. So that was so interesting. A beautiful structure and a beautiful process there, I think, and so lovely to have that illustration of the difference that it's already making to Don and the others. So we're going to move on now to our 10-minute question section. Ben, it feels like there was a lot of experimentation and so on as part of this project. So I'm going to bring you in first to share with us your initial reflections and your question for Melissa.
Melissa, hi. Thanks for that. It was fascinating to see and good to just see people doing things differently. I'd probably share your frustrations in that I've worked with modular construction for at least 20 years, and as you know, it's either big factories or small workshops in my experience, and I've done both of those in a sort of hands-on way and seen what happens. So what I'm really thrilled by this one is the fact that you actually got it made and in use and extended its life as well. I think it's one of the hardest things to do. So you talked about scalability, and I'm curious about that, because I think these things do rely on that kind of grassroots participation, enthusiasm, sort of energy, and often don't scale because there isn't a Melissa everywhere. So I just wondered, how can we do more of it, is my question.
I think, well, I'm maybe more optimistic. I think there's lots of Melissas all over the place, thank goodness. And there is this growing movement of community-led and trying to do things differently. And also a lot of people, you know, from the development industry, realizing that things aren't working and wanting to experiment and kind of try things differently. So I'm quite optimistic that this is, we're very much part of this wider movement to do things. Where I think the potential to scale is that we've got to be involved much more early in kind of discussions about kind of master planning or redevelopment of sites. There's a tendency to only start talking to the community once you're approaching planning, and you need to kind of like, get everyone through planning. Or, oh gosh, we've got to think about a bit of public realm and do something nice. And it's at the very end, even after planning, that it kind of comes in and start talking to the community in meaningful ways. So I think it's how do we get, in earlier at the real kind of thinking about things and dreaming about things, and not treated as a consultee, but as a co-producer and a co-designer, and treated as an equal in the development process. Rather than a tricky thing to be de-risked, we can actually make development much better, much more kind of powerful for everyone, really. And I think there are a growing number of kind of local authorities and other people that are beginning to get this. So we'd love to play with those people, and I think that's how you begin to demonstrate it.
Thank you. Some emojis going there, some love for your answer, so thank you very much for that. Vicky, I'd like to bring you in now, please. Your reflections and thoughts, and a question, please, for our
thanks, Melissa. I just wanted to say I really love the age range that it's bringing together, these 17 to 76, and the different backgrounds of everyone. That's really, really lovely. I had a few questions about how do you recycle it, and you touched on it at the end there, and I just wondered what the future of this pavilion is. Can it be something that you could do on a yearly basis? Can it be part of an events thing that the council or your borough or your immediate community can be doing? And what kind of draws did it have from neighbouring communities? Did it sort of put you on the map a little bit more and change the perception of the area?
Yeah, so I mean, all the blocks can be kind of broken down into their constituent parts. So some of them have had a tough time through the kind of like the weather and the rain of 9 months. But we're now, and we've got build camp this week actually, where we're taking it apart and remaking it into those other things. And so they can definitely have that second life and third life as other things. So we're designing them into stages and planters and all sorts, and other kind of like smaller pavilions. So, and I think it's what's happened is like, lots of people, can we have one of those? We wanted to kind of do that. Can we have that? And so all of those kind of conversations are beginning to kind of happen. And so that's part of this build camp. It's like different community groups coming in to try it out in a really hands-on way and see how it can work for them as well. So yeah, and we're kind of prototyping and playing with how, the weatherproofing and how it can be kind of a kind of ongoing kind of resource. But what's really nice about it is it's so adaptable, and you can add things and plug things into it. Mm-hmm. So that's the resource that we're playing with now, which I think is, that's the metaphor for our cities, isn't it? It's kind of like during COVID, we've revolving a neighborhood and how we need to adapt. And then this is the kind of plug-in, both social, because it's how we work together, but then also the physical infrastructure that you can do that adaptation process easier, quicker, and much more responsive. So that's where I think it's really exciting.
And do you think it's made an impact on the neighbouring communities?
Oh yeah. We've had people coming up and visit. My gosh, this is like one of the few places that people have been able to come and meet and do stuff because it's outside, and that's been a joy to kind of share that and have that as a kind of shared resource. So lots of kind of spreading, both Bristol and beyond.
It'd be nice to see if it could be done on a yearly basis, wouldn't it? Or if it.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of like an ongoing process.
Yeah, like new generations could help design the next iteration of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like tracking the life of these blocks as they kind of like, they start off in one place and then they get kind of adopted by another community and turned into something else, and then their third life and their fourth life. And it kind of continues on, and it's definitely trying to create this open resource, both in the process and the product. And, we're really excited about how, who can adopt it, who can take it on. Lowering those barriers to kind of getting stuff done.
Thank you, Aminah. We've got about 3 minutes for a final question. So take it away.
Great, Melissa. This was a wonderful project, an ongoing project. I won't say was, it is, because it's still alive and still moving forward. You're building not just structures, but also rebuilding up the community, as you've discussed. And I'm wondering, you talked about wear and tear a little bit, which is what I was going to get into. I know that there are, there's some prominent Japanese architects who work in paper and finding ways to make things to go from temporary to more permanent. I'm wondering if there's a wish list of things, perhaps, as the pavilion was, let's call it like phase 1, but moving forward, what are the other things the community would like to build, and is there a way to take them from temporary to more fixed?
Yeah, we've got a big wish list. We've got a huge list of all the lovely things that we want to build and prototype and things. So absolutely, it's kind of, temporary kind of social kind of public realm infrastructure, but it's also houses, and it's also the other kind of civic infrastructure as well that we need. So so we're beginning to design houses. We're thinking about how we can use different sites in the neighbourhood to do homes on microsites. And so it is a kind of evolving kind of architecture. Part of this week we're experimenting with different cladding systems. So can we get a universal cladding system so we can work with this stuff as well, using local materials, particularly thinking about circular economy and things like that. So it's definitely the kind of like the beginning of this, and there's so many directions that it can kind of go in. But yeah, definitely this isn't a thing just to be a kind of provocation in the kind of public realm. Absolutely, we want to making asks of kind of mainstream architecture and asks of mainstream development. And we want to kind of scale this to those kind of bigger projects as well.
How are you balancing I'm thinking the difference between maybe the core team of folks of all different ages, it sounds like, who are making the suggestions and then maybe dealing with the city council, what have you, and then those who aren't participating but are still being represented? What's the kind of bridge between you and the rest of the community?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very kind of like open kind of process. So in terms of the crew, we've got an incredibly able kind of crew now who've gone from didn't even know what modern methods of construction were, to being absolute kind of masters of it. And so they are our kind of champions. They're our people that can go and talk to others and share that. And so we're embedded community organisations. So making that an open process and kind of getting that out in terms of communication. And then it's just making open opportunities for people to come and experience that as well and be part of that kind of crew experience. So we've invited down a couple of the officers from Bristol City Council this week to come and have a go with the kind of mallet this week. And I think is that live doing stuff together, that's the stuff that really moves things on. And shows it not just being a theoretical thing or just a community thing, but this is a thing that could work, at a wider scale.
Has there been a lot of, I saw in the summer, I think, was there like some press or other people wanting to now kind of adopt the idea? So you had the link at the end. Have you been hearing from places even beyond England about this project and people wanting to take this on in other places?
Yeah, so we're part of something called the European Network of Living Labs. And so we did a kind of conference with those. And so that was kind of people from Finland to Canada, kind of learning about this process. So, and I think, is at a point, this is part of a movement. And so, there's a lot of kind of different people and places grappling with exactly the same challenges. So it's like, how do we share these tools and these practices and then, stronger together?
No, stronger together. That is that's the perfect that's the perfect note on which to unfortunately draw a close to the session. Thank you so much, Melissa. It's been really really fascinating, and thank you very much indeed to our first project and to our judges. We're going to take a very short comfort break now, so do grab a cuppa. Or if you'd like to join the table in the social lounge, you can meet other people there around a table. We're going to be back here sharp at 11 and ready to hear from our next two projects. So thanks again to our morning presenters for a really inspiring start to the day. And we'll be back at 11. Thank you very much.